Welcome back, everybody. Today's video is going to be a bit of a follow-up to the meta update from last week, where we talked about several broken items. And in those broken items, you have to think, what heroes utilize the broken items the best? So out of all the most broken items, I think the most meta-defining, because it comes out so early, is Mage Slayer. And what hero have I found that uses Mage Slayer? We've seen the Wyverns, we've seen the Embers, but my boy Viper is who I believe is one of the best Mage Slayer carries, and in this patch, if played correctly, is absolutely bonkers. I want to talk a bit about Viper. I need to give a disclaimer, okay, guys? And the disclaimer is, I know there's like an Ags, Shivas, be in the middle of everybody, disarm them, they can't attack type of build. I personally do not like this build, and this video is going to be all about the build I like and not talking about other options, because this is the build that I've won 5 games in a row with, that I feel like reliably scales, and conceptually, at least hopefully by the end of the video, you'll understand why I'm leaning this direction, even if you don't agree. So let's go ahead and get right into exactly how I see Viper being broken in 7.35b. Viper is a hero that is deceptively squishy. And what that means is if they get on top of him, he usually dies. But he tends to be frustrating to kill. Now, why is that? It's because he has built-in magic resistance, and a lot of heroes that bring him down, because he's such a long-range hero, are going to be the heroes pelting him with magic nukes. So because he's got built-in magic resistance, and he's a hero that can position at the outside of the fight, it becomes difficult to actually bring him down unless you're a physical right clicker. But then he's got his W, which attack slows, his ult, which breaks you and attack slows. So he becomes peskily survivable. Peskily, is that even a word? Well, for today's video, it is, people. All this being said, a lot of his counters are actually heroes that can either poke him from distance with non-magic damage spells, like pure damage spells, or physical damage spells. So how do we deal with that? Mage Slayer. So let's think about it this way, guys. I know spell damage and magic resistance are confusing topics. I get asked about them all the time. But Mage Slayer, yeah, it gives you extra base magic resistance, which seems to be diminishing returns when you're playing a hero like Viper because of corrosive. But Mage Slayer, if you read the debuff, is 40% less spell damage. That includes physical and pure damage. So these heroes like Timbersaw, these heroes like Drow with multi-shot, suddenly their abilities aren't doing any damage. So what we're basically saying is heroes that used to out-poke Viper. I use the term poke because from a distance, they do damage to you, you do damage to them, you're kind of poking the bear. They used to win this matchup. They used to be the best heroes against Viper. But now with Mage Slayer, these heroes just don't do what they need to do to bring down Viper. You have to commit onto him, and we've got items that we can build towards later that deals with these types of things happening. So first and foremost, this build is about off lane or mid Viper. When we're talking about lane matchups, specifically mid, I think Lina is the only really unplayable matchup. And that's because she outranges you and she has a built-in attack speed buff, so she can outtrade you for the most of the lane. So keep in mind that if I'm playing mid Viper, I would probably opt to ban Lina. If I'm playing off lane Viper, it's actually PL and Naga, who are the two heroes I would really highly prioritize banning. If we take up Viper's worst matchups on Dota Buff, you'll see that it's all the illusion heroes. The single target ultimate that now breaks is far worse versus these heroes. The only one that I think is truly unplayable in the lane is Naga. But CK, we haven't been seeing him as much, but it's really important to note that you can even see Viper's win rate is above 50% against all these heroes except for Phantom Lancer. I think you lane well against him, but the reason Phantom Lancer is so annoying for you is because of the way Viper wants to play. Now, I know this is like reading into statistics and interpreting them the way that I want to, but the reason why I think Viper is so good at poking is he's like the best hero to play this long range style. Also explains why PL is so good, because PL goes Ags and he pokes you from distance with Spirit Lance better than you poke him, because he can dispel and his illusions really hurt, and you don't have a way to deal with Lance, which is predominantly physical damage once the illusions spawn on top of you. So I often think that heroes that are really good at a playstyle, if that playstyle is done better by an enemy hero, in this case PL versus Viper, then that hero is going to hard counter you. But I also think that that tells you that is the optimal playstyle for said hero. Because theoretically, if PL's rushing on top of you, the W is great because it's attack speed slow, the Shivas, the Ags, all that kind of stuff. But if it's telling me my win rate against this hero is still that bad with items that I'm supposed to be buying to counter it, then I'm not convinced. That's my one argument against the other build that I'll be giving throughout the course of this video. But otherwise, we're sticking to my build. So his buffs that he received in 7.35. His ult, now being a single target break, makes him good against almost every carry except for the ones we mentioned, because now it breaks you through BKB. That's crippling for most heroes in the game. His W now attack speed slows instead of breaks. That's actually a buff against a lot of jungle camps like the golems, because now they spawn the little golems. And the attack speed slow allows you to sit inside of that nether toxin without taking so much damage that you die while you're farming. I want you to think about the fact that Viper's corrosive skin is similar to Spectre's dispersion in the sense that you let the creeps hit you once every 4 seconds and it speeds up your farm. So Viper wants to be placing nether toxin, tanking with corrosive skin, and farming camps that way. It's important to note that that means the one issue you will have is health sustain, which we will talk about later because the build I have for you doesn't really provide you with health sustain. Side note, if you are farming camps with one big creep, don't hesitate to nether toxin and poison attack the big creep 3 or 4 times. You'll get a good feel for it depending on what camp it is in order to bring down the camp right around a similar pace. Now, we're going to talk about some mechanical tips and tricks for Viper. First and foremost, it's super important that you are not manually auto-casting poison attack. What that means is if you right-click this, it becomes automatic where your attacks will use it. Let's make sure that we're using optimal hotkeys and learn how to use smart double tap, which means that if I turn this on and in the middle of the game, I push Alt Q, it will toggle poison attack being auto-casted or not. It is important to note that poison attack does not draw creep aggro as an attack if I cast it manually, meaning I click Q on the opponent. If I have it auto casted on and then I attack command an opponent, it will draw creep aggro. So these are little nuances that are really important for you to understand if you're new to this type of mechanic. So we're going to go and jump into my item build for Viper. So when we're talking about mid or off lane, I don't think you're going to go bottle in mid. So it's about the same build. You could go bottle if you want to, but it's not really the way I like it. So my starting items are 2 slippers, a circlet, a branch, and some tangos. This is just to optimize your right-click damage and overall save slots for the items we're going to build later. Ideally, you'll like to go boots first, even if you're in the mid lane, because the most important thing is that you can keep your poison attack on the opponent. Go back for a single Wraith Band. In certain matchups with attack speed slows or where I need extra armor, I will go for a second Wraith Band, potentially Wand, but usually not both a second Wraith Band and a Wand. It's really just matchup dependent. And then treads straight into Mage Slayer. So the Mage Slayer buildup is really nice because that Sage's Mask early, Viper has huge mana problems, and you're only looking at like 1.5 mana regen. So that Sage's Mask is like a huge bolster to your ability to farm as well as cast poison attack in lane. So there's some big things to look out for when you're laning as Viper. So what I want you guys to know is that any individual hero against you is fucked. Like, let's just be clear. Viper is the lane griefingest, like carry game ruiningest offlaner, and he's still annoying mid out of every hero in the game. So what's that gonna mean is that the only proper counterplay for the opponent is to gank you with a lot of heroes, to do things that pick on you. So Viper is a great hero to work on your map awareness, and be prepared that if they are missing, they're probably ganking you. And if they're not ganking you, you're probably shitting on the guy you're laning against. So we don't have to worry about if they're not ganking us because we're shitting on them. We only have to worry about if they are. So I want to show you a few do's and don'ts in the lane. So one move that high MMR players like to make against Viper is exactly what you're going to see here. And it's something you should be incredibly wary of where the enemy 4 position is at the start of the game. As you see here, I don't see the enemy 4 position yet. And if you're the enemy 4 position against a Viper offlane, highly encourage you to try to make this play because Viper is not all that tanky. 3 armor, 275 move speed, really easy level 1 kill. So you're going to see here that I walk up to lane because I'm being conceptually lazy, not really thinking about the game, not looking for the 4, and I die like a noob. And this is something that happens a lot on the likes of Viper, Necro, these like somewhat squishy, low move speed ranged heroes that hit huge power spikes like 2-3 minutes into the lane. So be super careful of not letting this happen to you. Now, next note is when you look at his poison attack, it goes double in damage from level 1 to 2, and the magic resistance goes up. So what that's really important to note here is that the value of this spell is more than twice as good level 2 as it is level 1. So that doesn't mean never cast it when you're level 1, but what it means is make sure you're using it sparingly level 1, and once you hit level 3 with level 2 poison attack, that is an absolutely massive power spike for you. So let's talk about skill build real quick. Some lanes, especially mid, if I don't want to poison attack them, I'll take my corrosive skin level 1. I will take nether toxin against really bad matchups like Naga and PL. But if you're playing offlane Viper, I highly encourage you to number 1, prioritize Naga, number 2, prioritize PL, because these are by far his most unplayable matchups, and I would only take nether toxin against these unplayable matchups. But this is simply saying that by level 3, I'm going to have 201, and I didn't want to cast Q level 1, so I took this because it's free, right? Doesn't cost anything. So level 3, I have 201. By level 4, unless I'm absolutely dumpstering the lane, I will take a point in nether toxin. If I'm dumpstering the lane, that means I'm using my poison attack a lot, and I want to make sure I'm super tanky as well with corrosive skin. But the W point is really nice. In case you get ganked like this, you have an option to recover in this camp back here or back here, and then you can also just push the lane in and pull the big camp if you feel like you don't really want to contest them all that much. The W just gives you a lot more options, so unless I'm stomping, that's what I go for. So pretty much always I'll take a 3rd point in poison attack and ulti at 6. After that though, I only take the max poison attack if the person's laning still, which to be honest, if they're laning against Viper, they're probably messing up, because level 6 Viper with Viper Strike and 3 points poison attack is death for like most heroes in the game, and even if you don't kill them, they take like 500 damage for free. So if they're still choosing to lane, I'll take poison attack. If I'm purely looking to farm, I'll take nether toxin. If I'm looking to balance laning and farming, I'll start maxing corrosive skin. When we look at talents, at level 10 I take the right one, at level 15 I take the left one, at level 20 I take the right one, because I feel like at that stage of the game most heroes have dispels, and if I'm stacking them with poison attack already, they're just getting effed anyways, so I don't see the point in that one. And at level 25 it's more like, am I utility or am I more of a right click carry? At this stage in the game decides which one I'm going to take, and that's heavily dependent upon how you itemize and the matchups you're in, and we'll talk about items in just a bit. So we've talked about the way Viper itemizes early game. The most important thing to note about Mage Slayer and why it's so important early is it's actually pretty good for farming, because it gives you 20 damage per second on each of your autos. So when you're clicking camps, you just go click, 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 and it's 120 damage, which is nice on an item that gives you mana regen on a hero that desperately needs it, and then the attack speed is also really nice. The reason why the Treads Mage Slayer is super necessary, I was trying mana boots at first, but if you go mana boots, then you're basically only able to farm with your nether toxin, and you can't rotate very well between jungle camps and lane if you do that. The Treads lets you do both. You can like nether toxin the lane really quickly and then walk over and kill a camp by using 3 or 4 poison attacks on the big creep, and the Mage Slayer kind of makes all the creeps die at about the same time. So this attack speed is actually super necessary, I think, for Viper to be able to maximize his farm, but it also makes him do a lot more damage in fights. I initially was skeptical that Viper needed Treads, but I saw a lot of Vipers going Treads, and I still think it's by far the most optimal build because of that dynamic. But when we're thinking about what Mage Slayer offers you is that when you're farming, if there's somebody else trying to clear the wave, a lot of the times what people do against Viper is they try to clear the wave really quickly and then leave because they don't want to deal with you. But with Mage Slayer, I just make sure I click the enemy one time. And even if I normally wouldn't have been able to stop them from clearing the wave because they're usually auto-attacking it, ready to nuke it, now their nuke does no damage. So I can't tell you how often people have tried to do that. I just right-click them with the Mage Slayer, and then they don't clear the wave. They don't get that farm, because even though I can't stop them from leaving, they lose out on farm in the process. So it accelerates my farm and decelerates the opponent's farm at the stage that you get it, which is usually what we want our first item as a core to do, which is to help us win the farm battle, because that's what most heroes are doing 10 to 12 minutes in. So after we get the Mage Slayer, there's strong consideration. Do we need a Dispel? Are we dealing with Orchids or the like? which means that I go Manta almost immediately? Are we dealing with heroes that we don't really want to contest, but later on in the fights, we're more concerned about being able to position? That's when we go for Lance and Pike, right? Because Lance helps us position in fights, and we talked about our teamfight utilities just clicking people with Mage Slayer, right? So the Lance basically increases our AoE of impact. On top of that, though, the farm acceleration item that we're looking for is Maelstrom. Maelstrom on Viper now with the attack speed built in and pairing it with the damage amp of his Q on enemies. It's just so powerful that I like to go it usually after Manta or Lance or Pike, like meaning however many of those I need to survive. I like to go Maelstrom once I feel like I can survive. But if I also feel like I can't really survive all that well, I might just go Mage Slayer Maelstrom and farm Ancients and play kind of like a one position. That depends on what carry hero I have. If I have like a Medusa or a Luna, I'm not going to do that. If I have like a Slark though, I'd be more likely to do that because Slark doesn't farm Ancients. So these items that I'm looking at are Manta, Pike, Gleipnir / Mjolnir, and those being the primary follow-ups to your Mage Slayer. Now, before we even get into his like situational late game items and all that kind of stuff, let's talk about neutral items, because I think neutral items are really important for Viper and are a key part of what makes this build actually work so well. So if you notice in the early game, all the items I'm telling you to buy, there's no health regen in there. So what that means, if we're looking at tier 1 neutrals, is Bubble is god tier. Absolute S god tier. You heard it here first, people. Bubble reduces damage the barrier with reductions. So your corrosive skin makes the barrier even more powerful. You will be topped off HP all time, farming, super tanky, never squishy, Bubble. Next, obviously, Seeds of Serenity. Gives you HP regen, a little bit of flat HP, but it is not quite as good as Bubble. The third reject item, you're probably going to get one of these three every game, is Shovel, because you can dig up salves. The most important thing about this build is it lacks HP regen, and that just needs to be solved with your level 1 neutral. And if you don't solve it, max out that corrosive skin and don't be afraid to fly yourself 1 or 2 salves throughout the course of the early game, because I don't think there's an item that we want to buy that fixes this problem. And it's honestly happened to me, and it's not that big of a deal. You just do have to adjust a little bit in the small percentage of games where that happens. Tier 2 neutral items. Grove Bow, absolute god tier, obviously. Specialist Array is next up. Light Collector, for the move speed and regen that it provides, is actually my third. And then Bullwhip, which is also for movement speed and regen. You're starting to notice what Viper lacks. We need to give him attack range, we need to give him move speed, and we need to give him regen. Tier 3, oddly enough, I would replace Grove Bow with Enchanted Quiver. If I have Grove Bow other than Enchanted Quiver, I will not replace it. The reason why is because Enchanted Quiver allows me to hit somebody from like 1200 range just to apply the Mage Slayer debuff. I know that sounds gimmicky, but it's actually broken. But other than that, if I don't have Grove Bow and I did not get Enchanted Quiver, I take Paladin or Ogre Seal Totem as like really good utility items, or Elven Tunic as like a movement speed, attack speed item. We're not going to worry about tier 4s and tier 5s because, you know, as Viper, the game's going to end before then already. But just note, move speed and regen are what we're looking for. And half the time you're going to keep Grove Bow anyway. So, okay, Viper. There's always this meme that he's a win lane, lose game kind of hero. Now, I'm just going to give you a quick argument for why that's no longer the case. His ultimate now being the break means that late game, his W when it was the break, used to just, people just force stab out of it, walk out of it, whatever. But you can't get away from Viper Strike. The only issue is Lincoln's perhaps, but you usually have Hurricane Pike. The point is that break being on his ultimate makes him scale way better in almost every matchup that has a passive. And then on top of that, his other issue in the late game is move speed. How do we solve that? We talked about the broken items last week. Disperser, baby. So yes, Disperser I think is one of the best 4th or 5th items on Viper. It also enables no boots later on every hero, but especially on Viper. And just keep in mind that it's a dispel that hastes you. What else does Viper want, right? So 4th, 5th item, I love Disperser on him. Every other item, it's really important to consider that if I'm going Gleipnir, I'm likely Manta Hurricane Pike. If I'm going for Mjolnir, because I need attack speed or the Mjolnir active, then I'm going for BKB. The way we talked about survivability at the beginning of this video is that Viper sits in the back and either Mage Slayer debuffs everybody in the fight or forces you to commit onto him. So what that means for you is your two builds are like Manta Hurricane Pike Gleipnir, where you're kiting backwards, dispelling, rooting them, or it's BKB Mjolnir and you stand your ground, ult the one right-click guy on top of you, and then click everybody else. That's like the two builds you got. Okay, that's the way I look at it. But most notably, be very patient with your positioning. Just be so patient. Do not put yourself in the fray, guys, because that is exactly what you're baited to do, thinking that you're tanky and you're probably winning the early game and all that kind of stuff. Make the opponent commit onto you. And I want to show you very briefly what I mean by that. I know we're going to be up by a lot in this replay, but it's the best example I had out of all my games to just show you what I mean when I'm playing Viper, right? So what I mean is we're sieging, and when the fight breaks out, my job is to just click everybody once, right? So what you're going to see is click. DP has to run in. Click this guy. Make sure he does no damage. Click that guy. Make sure he does no damage. And then the Mjolnir in this game was for the Phoenix Egg. And then I click the Void so he does no damage. And this whole idea is to kite backwards and just say, you do no damage, you do no damage, you do no damage. And make sure, I tried to originally force staff my carry there, but that's something I don't even think I should have done. Save your abilities mainly for yourself unless you're super confident. And that's going to be the way you play. So notice how in this game I have the BKB Hurricane Pike as my build. While in this game I went for the Mage Slayer Manta Gleipnir, right? So it's like the same idea. One thing to note is that if I get safety bubble and I'm in the mid game and I have a tier 2 neutral item already, I will save the safety bubble in my inventory and swap it back in after a fight and just stay on the map, sacrificing a little bit of farm speed from Grove Bow or Specialist Array. You'll see that I did it in this game. I get gone on, we take a fight, I lose half my HP, we get 2 kills, and I had safety bubble in my backpack, and I swap it in. You can do that with Seeds of Serenity as well. It's not as good. The reason why Safety Bubble is even better is not only does it give me 5 HP regen, but while I'm farming, the creeps that are casually hitting me for like 20, 30 damage aren't doing any damage because of the Safety Bubble. So I'm just flat regenning 12 HP per second, and you will be back to full in no time. Like if you check it out as we fast forward, like I'm just farming, getting all my HP back. Absolutely lovely, right? So I've said everything I need to say about Viper today, guys. This may be more talking about Viper than you bargained for coming into the BSJ channel. But I do believe this hero is absolutely broken if played correctly. I lost my first 3 games this patch playing him because I really didn't understand how to itemize or scale with him late game and all the little things I told you to look out in the laning phase for. But I've won my last 5 games, and it's even if I get dumpstered in lane like I did in this game, I actually died 3 times in the first 6 minutes, or that's one alternative and you recover, or I just dumpster the enemy carry and they're rage quitting at minute 20 or earlier. Those are the types of games I've been getting, and I really encourage you guys, now's the time to try Viper because the new items make him really fun, versatile, and I never thought I'd be saying Viper and fun in the same sentence. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.